Hi, my name is Kale. On my 25th birthday, I booked the same table my father used to save for me, back when my family still looked me in the eye. But the moment I rolled in, my brother leaned in and said I was not stable. Just like that, I wasn't a guest anymore. I was a problem. They pushed me outside. Cold rain, bright lights, no family. Then a stranger bent down and whispered something so quiet. It hit louder than the storm. And that's when I realized this wasn't about my chair. It was about erasing me and what I still remembered. I hadn't been back to that restaurant since before the accident. Not because I didn't want to, but because some places hold memories the way skin holds scars. You don't notice them until you press too hard. This place was where my father used to take me every year on my birthday. Same booth, same corner, same quiet joke about how I always ordered like I was afraid the menu might disappear if I took too long. Once, when I was 10, he had a small wooden plaque screwed into the side of the booth. Kale's Corner. Nothing fancy. Just my name, carved by someone who thought I mattered. That's why I chose it. I made the reservation weeks in advance. I didn't tell my family. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted one night that felt normal again. One night where I wasn't the accident or the recovery or the thing people lowered their voices around. I spent more time than I'd admit choosing what to wear. Not to impress anyone, just to feel like myself. When I finally rolled through the front doors that evening, the smell hit me first. Butter, warm bread, something citrusy from the bar. For a second, my chest loosened. The hostess smiled, then hesitated when I gave my name. "I have a reservation," I said. "Kale Drayton, 7 o'clock. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She frowned slightly, looked again. "I'm sorry," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Could you give me a moment?" I waited. Chairs scraped. Glasses clinked. People laughed the way they do when they believe they belong somewhere. Another staff member came over. They whispered. Someone glanced at me, then looked away too quickly. That familiar feeling crept in. The one where you're present, but somehow already dismissed. Before I could ask again, Lennox walked in. My brother always looked like he belonged in rooms like this. Tailored jacket, easy smile, the kind of confidence that made people assume he was in charge, even when he wasn't. He stopped when he saw me, just long enough for surprise to register. Then it vanished. He stepped past me and leaned toward the hostess. "This was a mistake," he said quietly, like he was correcting a typo. "That booth is reserved for a private family dinner." I stared at him. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't raise it either. He just spoke, as if reality would rearrange itself to match whatever he said. Our eyes met. He smiled, not warmly, politely, the way you smile at someone you don't plan to acknowledge again. No one argued. No one asked me anything. A manager approached. Jesse, I later learned. His voice was careful, apologetic. "I'm really sorry," he said. "There's been a change. We'll need to ask you to step outside for a moment." Outside turned into the side entrance. The rain had started while I wasn't looking. Cold drops soaked my jeans. The neon sign above the door flickered, buzzing like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. They didn't rush me. They didn't shove me. That almost made it worse. Being removed gently still counts as being removed. I sat there, hands resting uselessly on my lap, trying to understand how something that had belonged to me for so long could disappear without anyone even arguing. After a few minutes, Jesse came out. He crouched slightly so we were eye level. Your brother told us. He paused. He said you weren't stable, that it wouldn't be appropriate for you to be seen around the crowd. The words didn't sting right away. They settled instead. Heavy, permanent. So that was it. Not a mix-up, not an error, a decision. The rain kept falling. People walked past without looking. Then, a man I didn't recognize stopped. He bent down beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "It's not your body that makes them uncomfortable," he whispered. "It's your presence." He walked away before I could ask who he was. I stayed there, soaked and still, the words echoing louder than the rain. The stranger's voice echoed long after he walked away. The kind of sentence that doesn't ask for a response, just sits inside you, rearranging everything you thought you understood. I didn't move. The rain softened, but by then it didn't matter. My jacket had soaked through, the sleeves stuck to my arms like wet paper. My hands rested on my lap, fingers still curled around nothing. People passed, some glanced, none stopped. It wasn't the weather that chilled me. It was the clarity. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had removed me. And it hadn't started tonight. It had started long before I needed wheels to move. A car door slammed in the distance. The neon above the alley entrance buzzed and then dimmed for good. I adjusted my hands slightly on the armrests, wiped the side of my face where water had collected. The silence made space for something else. Memory. I was 10 the first time Dad took me to that booth. He wore a shirt he always said made him look less tired, and I had my usual nervous energy that came with birthdays. I remember him nudging a paper crown onto my head, then balancing one on his own, crooked and too small. We'd laughed. I think even Lennox smiled, though he never wore a crown. The cake came out, lit with 10 candles. The staff clapped. Lennox didn't. He was 12, too old to pretend anymore. But Dad? Dad had leaned in close and whispered, "You're the reason this place matters to me." Now. I wondered if it had ever mattered to anyone else. The rain let up as I made it back to the apartment. I'd left the heater on low. The moment I wheeled in, the warmth hit my soaked shirt and turned it into a second skin. I rolled past the kitchen, not bothering to turn on the lights, and left the jacket in the tub, watching it slump like something defeated. In the quiet, I noticed what wasn't there. No messages, no missed calls, no, "Where'd you go?" I reached into the drawer by the sink. Under a stack of papers and one frayed coupon book was the card from last year. "Happy birthday," blank inside. No signature, no handwriting. Just printed sentiment on glossy cardstock. It had felt impersonal then. Now it felt like a warning I hadn't known how to read. A knock at the door startled me. Not loud, just enough to pull me back into the present. I opened it slowly. Jesse stood there, shifting from foot to foot. He looked different without the restaurant vest. More human, less neutral. "I shouldn't stay," he said, holding out a sealed envelope. "But I thought you should have this." He didn't wait for a thank you, just gave a quick nod and turned before I could process what he'd handed me. Inside was a printout. Reservation log. The name, Lennox Drayton. Cancelled. 2:41 p.m. today. It wasn't an accident. Wasn't a miscommunication. It was a choice. Cold and deliberate. I stared at the paper, then at the empty room around me. There was nothing left to misunderstand. Later that night, I opened my laptop. I didn't post anything. Didn't rage. I searched. The Drayton Family Foundation had a clean website, past initiatives, smiling photos, community partnerships. In one picture, Lennox stood in the middle of a donation ceremony, hands folded, suit perfect. I was there that day. I remembered standing behind the crowd, taking photos, but I wasn't in the shot. I wasn't in any of them. Even events I'd helped organize, driven to, written speeches for. It was like I never existed. I saved the photos anyway. Click, click. Board members, grant recipients, press releases. Then I saw the plaque. Behind Lennox, on a polished wall, was a familiar shape, a nameplate. I zoomed in, the spot where it used to say, Cale's Corner, blurred, cropped, erased. They'd built something new, something public, but it had started with something they erased. They forgot something important, though. They erased the plaque, but I built the wall it hung on. I stared at the image on my screen, the blurred plaque just a ghost behind Lennox's polished smile. My name, once carved into wood and screwed into stone, gone. But I knew the wall. I had designed it. I'd spent months sketching every angle, pitching it to funders, picking materials. That curve behind him wasn't just architectural. It was mine. I sat there for a while in the dim light of my apartment, the hum of the fridge ticking off seconds. My hands rested on the keyboard, still. Not because I didn't want to move, because I didn't want to react too fast. Anger was easy. But this needed attention, precision. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had replaced me in plain sight. I clicked through more archived photos, event after event, smiling faces, ribbon cuttings, foundation launches, and not a single frame with me in it. Even when I remembered being there, shaking hands, giving introductions. They were curating history, their version of it, and I'd been helping them all along, until now. I pulled out the old hard drive from the drawer by the window. The label was smudged, but the files were intact. Dozens of folders, Cale_design drafts, funding_pitches, grant blueprints, each time stamped, each one signed with my initials. I opened a folder from 6 years ago. A project proposal for the Community Development Wing, the same one now credited to the Lennox Drayton Initiative. Inside, decks, quotes, handwritten notes scanned into PDFs. All mine. I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I just kept opening files. They didn't just leave me out. They built their names on my work. At 1:12 a.m., I texted Jesse. Still awake? He responded almost instantly. Yeah, you okay? Can you connect me with someone who knows digital archives? I need help pulling media they've tried to bury. There was a pause. Then, my cousin Sophia. She's good. I'll call her in the morning. I left the laptop open and leaned back. My body ached from the chair, from the rain, from the silence that had followed me home. But my mind, sharp. Sophia met me at a cafe near campus late the next morning. Her hair was buzzed short, her nails painted the color of dried blood. She was young, early 20s, but she moved like someone who had no patience for lies. You must be Cale, she said, sitting down with her iced coffee. Jesse told me you're looking for ghosts. Something like that, I replied. She slid her laptop across the table. Give me a link and a time range. I'll find the edits. I gave her the Foundation's site. She dug deeper into code layers, image metadata, page revision histories. Within 30 minutes, she had something. This video, she said, pulling up a fundraising training clip. You shot this? I did. They've cut around you. Watch. She played it once. The transitions looked smooth to the untrained eye. But I saw it. An awkward crop here, a too fast fade there. My voice had been stripped, my face removed. They didn't just leave you out, she said. They reconstructed the scene. I didn't respond, but something inside me clicked into place. Later that afternoon, I went to the storage unit I hadn't opened in over a year. The air inside smelled like dust and cardboard. I rolled to the back, where the boxes marked founding year were stacked like forgotten monuments. I opened one. Inside, a framed photo, slightly bent at the corner, me holding scissors. Ribbon stretched across the entrance to the foundation center. Behind me, Lennox, distracted, on the phone. Dad hadn't come that day. Said he had meetings. I'd believed him. I pulled out the old guest book. Signatures, messages. A note from a teacher who said, "Cale, you built something real here. Don't let anyone shrink it." I scanned the photo at home that evening. Cropped nothing. Tagged the location. Saved it in a folder I labeled unedited. This wasn't about revenge. It was about record. As I closed the laptop, a message came through. Sophia had texted me a screen cap from the Foundation's homepage. New event. Tomorrow. Keynote speaker, Lennox Drayton. Location? The restaurant. The same booth. The same ground. They're building a legacy on stolen ground. And they think I won't show up. I didn't rush getting ready. There was something steady about the way I laid my shirt flat, adjusted the cuffs, and brushed the sleeves smooth. I chose the same navy blazer I wore at the original opening of the Foundation building. The fit was a little different now. My shoulders weren't the same, but it still held its shape. Sophia picked me up just after 4. She didn't ask how I was feeling, and I appreciated that. She simply helped with the chair, double-checked the flash drive in her purse, and nodded when I said, "Let's go." The restaurant looked exactly like it had the night they pushed me out, except tonight they'd strung a cheap banner near the front entrance. Legacy in motion. I didn't go through the front. We parked near the alley, circled around to the rear ramp. I let the others walk in first, donors, guests, polished faces nodding and smoothing lapels. I could feel the air shift the moment we crossed the threshold. Not a single person stopped us, but every set of eyes found a way to slide past mine. Some offered stiff smiles, others kept their gaze high, fixated on light fixtures, wall art, anything but me. The hostess gave a tiny start when she saw me, but recovered with a nod. "Welcome," she said. Her voice caught slightly. "Please, enjoy the displays." It was almost funny. They trained the staff to smile, to accommodate every guest, except when the discomfort came not from noise, but from memory. I moved slowly through the crowd. The displays flanked the hallway. Foam boards mounted with photos, news clippings, pull quotes in neat serif fonts. Sophia stayed close, phone in hand, her eyes darting between frames and faces. I stopped at the second board. That image, I knew it. Our first youth outreach event. I'd coordinated the entire thing, permit paperwork, vendor setup, logistics. I remembered standing just left of the podium, smiling like I'd finally belonged. But in this version, I wasn't there. Just Lennox at center, flanked by 2 volunteers. The crop was clean, but not perfect. The handle of my chair remained, just a sliver in the far left margin. An oversight. Sophia noticed it too. "They edited all of these?" she murmured, stepping closer to the board. I nodded once. She raised her phone and started taking photos, slowly, deliberately. Her tone was quieter when she said, "This isn't forgetting. This is rewriting." I didn't look at her. I just said, "And now I'm the typo they can't explain." We moved on. Another board. This one from the grand announcement day. Lennox with the mayor. Lennox shaking hands with donors. But no images from the early meetings. None from the first walkthrough I'd done with city engineers. None from the day I sat on the sidewalk outside council chambers, waiting in my chair for the public session to start. I didn't expect them to hang a banner with my name, but I hadn't expected silence to echo this loud either. From across the room, a voice called out, cheerful and practiced. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Please gather near the podium." Lennox stood beneath soft lighting, microphone in hand. The crowd moved around us like a slow tide, drifting toward the speech. I stayed where I was, just outside the main cluster, facing the photo boards. Lennox's voice was smooth. He talked of beginnings, of vision, of how much the foundation had grown. "Our mission," he said, "has always been grounded in inclusion, empowerment, and honoring the people who stood beside us from day one." Sophia glanced over. I didn't say a word at first. Then I leaned slightly in her direction and said, "I stood, and then sat. And then they asked me to leave." My voice was calm. It wasn't a protest. It was a note in the margins. Lennox never looked my way. He ended his speech with applause. Smiles and handshakes followed. The crowd scattered to cocktail tables, wine glasses lifted, laughter soft and rehearsed. I stayed by the board. I didn't move. People walked past. A few slowed. A couple of older board members stared for a second too long. No one said my name, but they looked, and they saw, even if they couldn't admit it. That was enough. For tonight. We left before the dessert trays came out. Outside, the air was cooler. Sophia didn't speak until we reached the car. "You shook the whole room just by standing still." I didn't answer. Back home, I rolled toward my desk and opened my inbox. One new message. Subject: "I remember you were there." I clicked it open. The sender's name was familiar. A former volunteer. Inside, a zip file and a single line of text. "I kept the originals. Let me know if you want them." If memory is power, they just gave me a match. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was wired, but because my mind kept sorting things into piles. Faces, words, moments that didn't make sense on their own, but started lining up once you stopped pretending they were accidents. By late morning, the sun had found its way through the thin blinds, cutting pale stripes across the floor. I had already been up for a while, rolling between the kitchen and the desk, replaying last night in my head, without letting it turn into anger. Anger made noise. I didn't need noise. I needed clarity. My phone lay face down on the table. I hadn't replied to the message about the originals yet. I wanted to sit with it a little longer, understand what it meant before touching it. That's when the knock came. Not rushed, not hesitant. 3 firm taps. Familiar. Confident. I knew who it was before I reached the door. I checked the peephole anyway. Lennox stood there like he belonged in the hallway. Clean-cut suit. Fresh shave. That same polite half-smile he used when cameras were around. The kind that said, "I'm here to help," while his eyes said something else entirely. I opened the door. "Hey," he said, already stepping inside like the word itself was permission. "Just wanted to check on you." The smell of cologne followed him in, sharp, expensive, layered over last night's event. He glanced around my apartment as if he were taking mental inventory. The couch, the bookshelf, the framed photo on the wall that he didn't recognize. I didn't invite him to sit. He did anyway. "You look good," he said, scanning me from head to toe, considering everything. I gave a single nod, nothing more. He clasped his hands, leaned forward slightly. "Last night stirred things up. People were surprised to see you." "I live here," I said. "That shouldn't shock anyone." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know what I mean. It's not about geography. It's about expectations." He stood and wandered toward the window, fingertips brushing the sill. "This place," he said, almost conversationally. "It's modest, but neat. You've always been good at making the most of what you're given." I watched him closely now, not listening to the words, watching the rhythm, the pauses, the way he tested a sentence, then adjusted when it didn't land the way he wanted. "You didn't call before coming," I said. "Oh." He waved a hand. "I didn't think you'd mind. Family, right?" That word. Family. He used it the way people use blankets, only when it suits them. He turned back to me, adjusting his cufflinks. "You really shouldn't have shown up last night, Cale." There it was. "Some tables," he continued, voice smooth, "aren't meant for everyone. That's not cruelty. That's just how things work." I held his gaze. "Funny. You didn't seem to mind using the things I built to set those tables." The smile tightened. He sighed as if I were being difficult. "You're reading too much into it. Back then, we all agreed it was important to make you feel included." The words landed, but they didn't cut yet. I waited. "Representation matters," he added lightly. "People like seeing that we care." I felt something shift in my chest, not heat, not pain, just a clean break. "I wasn't a token," I said. He didn't blink. "No," he replied. "You were a gesture. Same thing, really." That did it. Not the insult itself, but the ease of it. The casual way he rewrote years of work into a footnote meant to make others comfortable. Every late night, every meeting, every plan with my initials on it. A charity case. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply watched him finish the thought he thought he was allowed to say. "You had your moment," he continued, "and it helped. Truly. But things have moved on. People are asking questions now. That's not good for you. Or for us." He reached for my coffee cup on the table and took a sip without asking. "You've been through a lot," he said gently. "It would be a shame if you burned through what little goodwill you still have." I let the silence stretch. He took another sip, then set the cup down like he owned it. Finally, he stood and straightened his coat. "Just don't show up to places where you're not invited, little brother." I rolled toward the door before he could take another step. Opened it. "Then maybe stop using things I built to host them," I said. For the first time since he arrived, Lennox froze. Not for long. Just enough. He recovered quickly, nodded once, and walked past me without another word. I closed the door behind him. Locked it. No slam. No drama. I stayed there for a moment, hand resting on the handle, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. When I turned back, the apartment felt different. Quieter. Lighter. Like something had finally settled. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Sophia. "Got something you need to hear." Attached was an audio file, not a photo, not a document. I pressed play, and the voice that filled the room, calm, confident, unguarded, belonged to Lennox. The file ended, but the silence it left behind rang louder than anything Lennox had said. I stared at the waveform still blinking on the screen. His voice echoed in my head, not just the tone, but the certainty. The kind that comes from knowing you've buried something so deep no one will ever find it again. Except he forgot one thing. I have an inconvenient memory. Long after the audio stopped playing, I sat there unmoving. It wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. You don't fight back by throwing punches in the dark. You wait for the moment someone leaves the door unlocked. And Lennox just left the damn vault wide open. The line he'd dropped, so casually I almost missed it, slammed back into focus. He doesn't even remember that clause in the old filings. I cleaned that mess up years ago. But I did remember. Not the clause exactly, not the legalese. But I remembered the pen, the table, the way he slid the packet across to me at the office back in 2017, like it was nothing. I was still in physical therapy then. My back ached if I sat too long, and my hands trembled when I held anything heavier than a coffee mug. Lennox had smiled that day, real casual. "You trust me, right? It's just a board approval form, legal housekeeping. You're still listed. We just need to consolidate wording for the bank." I'd signed because I was tired, because he was family, because I didn't think I'd need to protect myself from my own brother. That night, I barely slept. At dawn, I rolled into the closet and pulled down the metal file box I hadn't opened in years. It was dented along one edge and still smelled faintly of old paper and glue. I dug past medical records, building permits, a stack of yellowing newsletters from the Foundation's early years. Nothing. Then another box. This one tucked behind the water heater. I popped it open, and there it was. A faded manila folder labeled 2017 Archive. Inside, page after page of board memos, funding drafts, scanned documents. I flipped through until my fingers found it. The document with both our names. 2 signatures. Mine. His. The clause, buried halfway down, in legal language so plain it almost sounded like it wasn't important. Founding contributor's identity, name, and authorship shall remain attached to all derivatives, representations, and media pertaining to the origin and mission of said foundation, unless formally revoked in writing. No such revocation existed, because Lennox never thought I'd look. By mid-morning, I called Sophia. "You said you still had access to the firm's shared server, right?" She paused. "I do. But Cale, what are you about to do?" "I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm retrieving something that's mine." A beat, then her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm coming to get you." By noon, we were at the firm's former offices. Most of the rooms were empty, downsized after the restructuring 2 years ago. But the data closet in the back still held an archive terminal, untouched, dusty. Sophia slid her keycard, bypassed the admin wall like muscle memory. Within minutes, the digital twin of my old document loaded onto the screen, time-stamped, verified, same language, same clause, same signatures. "You want to print it?" she asked. "No," I said. "Email it to me and send a copy to your private cloud. Label it Furniture Catalog. Something boring." She smirked. "You're learning." Back at my apartment, I changed into a clean shirt and wheeled over to the dining table. There, I laid out both copies. One hard copy from my storage box, one freshly printed from the archive server. The ink hadn't changed, the signature hadn't faded, and suddenly, neither had I. That evening, I made one more call, to someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 4 years, Daniel Brooks, former junior counsel at the firm, now partner at a modest but sharp independent practice. He answered on the second ring. "Kyle," he said, a note of pleasant surprise under the caution. "I need an hour of your time," I said. "I have something you'll want to see." We met the next morning in a narrow office overlooking a church parking lot. Daniel hadn't changed much, maybe a few more gray hairs, a slightly fuller beard, but when I handed him the document, he flipped through it with the same quiet focus I remembered. When he got to the clause, his eyes narrowed. "You're sure no amendments were ever filed?" "I'm sure." He sat back, tapping the edge of the page with his pen. "If this holds, and I'm not seeing a reason it wouldn't, you're not just a ghost on the sidelines anymore. This makes you a recognized founder, which means public acknowledgement, potential financial remedy, and depending on how deep they've cut you out, grounds for legal redress." "I'm not looking for a payday," I said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Then what are you looking for?" I leaned forward. "Visibility, permanence, the part they tried to rip out of the story. I want that back." He nodded slowly. "This won't be quiet, Cale. Lennox has built a lot on your absence." I held his gaze. "Then it's time he answers for it." As I left Daniel's office, a memory hit me hard, one I hadn't allowed myself to examine too closely until now. Back in 2017, the day I'd signed that form, Lennox had brought lunch to the boardroom. A sandwich, a black coffee. He was humming to himself, flipping through emails, and smiling like a man who was already 3 steps ahead. "You'll thank me later," he'd said as I passed the pen across the page. And I had. For years, I told myself he meant well, that he was just managing pressure. But now I saw it for what it was. A power move dressed in kindness. A hand on your shoulder to distract you from the knife already in motion. And yet, he made one mistake. He thought I was the kind of man who'd forget. Back home, I placed the scanned document in a locked folder and drafted an email, not to send yet, just to write it out, to see the words, to feel their weight. Then I composed a single message to Lennox. "You might want to revisit the 2017 filings and check the timestamp on the digital copy. I think you forgot a signature." I didn't wait for a reply. I powered off the phone and turned toward the window. The city outside was waking up again, unaware of the quiet tectonic shift happening in one small apartment on the 4th floor. A few minutes later, a knock at the door. Sophia. She stepped inside, her face unreadable. "He's panicking," she said. "Scheduled a private board meeting. No press, no external counsel, just internal members." I nodded once. "Then it's time to attend the meeting they thought I'd never walk into again." Sophia dropped me off 2 blocks away. We didn't speak much during the drive. She knew what this meant, and I was already playing it out in my head, not the drama, but the silence, because it wasn't going to be loud. It never had to be. What they feared wasn't a scene. It was memory, walking back through a door they'd quietly welded shut. The foundation's main building hadn't changed much. Frosted glass doors, polished limestone floors. Same receptionist, though she avoided eye contact when I rolled past her. I didn't stop at the desk. The boardroom sat at the far end of the west wing. Heavy oak double doors, soundproofed. The kind of room built for secrets to stay sealed. But today, I wasn't knocking. The doors weren't locked. I pushed them open slowly. The wheels of my chair hummed against the marble, a steady sound that cut through murmurs like a wire through cloth. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head turned. Some expressions flickered in recognition, others froze in discomfort. Two board members instinctively glanced at Lennox. He was already on his feet. "This is a closed session," he said, voice calm, too calm. I wheeled forward, placed a dark leather folder on the table, and met his gaze. Then I'm in the right room. No one moved, not even Lennox. I opened the folder, slid one sheet out, just one, and placed it neatly at the center of the table. "Before we begin, I want to reintroduce myself," I said, my voice measured. "I'm Cale Drayton, co-founder." It didn't explode, that sentence. It rippled. A slow, involuntary shift through the room, like a shiver down a collective spine. Chairs creaked, papers rustled. Lennox's lips parted, but he didn't speak. One of the older board members, Henley, I think his name was, reached for the paper, adjusted his glasses, read, then again. This predates the current charter," he muttered. "Exactly," I replied. "Filed, time-stamped, archived." I didn't raise my voice. The paper did that for me. Lennox forced a short laugh. "This is symbolic, nothing more. A formality, never activated." "Then why," I asked, still level, "did you make me sign it in ink, Lennox? Why file it with the Secretary of State?" Silence. Across the room, a younger board member leaned toward the paper, brow furrowed. "If this is valid, we need to halt the Q3 allocations. Anything issued under the restructured charter could be vulnerable." Lennox's jaw tensed. "Let's not overreact." But it was too late for that. They weren't reacting to me. They were reacting to the truth. I looked around the room, not for drama, not for applause, just to make sure they saw me, really saw me. "I'm not here to reclaim a seat," I said. "I'm here to remind you who built the table you're sitting at." Another beat passed, and then another. No one interrupted. No one dared. "You've used my name in silence," I continued. "You've built campaigns on the back of what I created, and then cropped me out of the photos like I was never there." Lennox bristled. "Now hold on." I didn't give him space to finish. "I'm not here to fight you, Lennox," I said, eyes on his. "I'm here to inform you. What's been built on top of my name will now answer to my terms, or face litigation. Not in court, in the media, in every room your donors walk into, in every conference you try to own." Someone coughed softly. Another shifted in his seat. The silence that followed was suffocating, and not for me. "I don't need an answer today," I said as I closed the folder, "but you'll want to decide before Monday." Then I backed away from the table, turned toward the door, and left the room the way I came in, without raising my voice, without looking back. Because now, they had to. The moment I stepped outside, the air felt heavier. Not oppressive, just charged. Like something had broken, and no one could pretend otherwise. By the time I returned to my apartment, late sunlight had slid halfway down the hallway wall. I moved slowly, my muscles sore but steady. Whatever I'd walked into that room carrying, I'd left it there, and it was theirs to deal with now. At my door, a courier envelope rested against the frame. No return address, just 5 words printed in plain black ink. "He's not done. Not yet." I didn't open the envelope right away. It sat on my kitchen table while I reheated last night's coffee, the kind that tastes like cardboard and resolve. I knew what it was the moment I saw it. You don't need a return address when the warning already showed up on your doorstep, in a suit and a smirk. Eventually, I slid my thumb beneath the flap. Legal paper, crisp and aggressive, spilled out. The headline read exactly what I expected. Notice of intent to dispute charter legitimacy. Filed that morning. Lennox's name wasn't on it. He was too smart for that. But I recognized the firm. Big enough to be loud. Careful enough to be clean. His fingerprints were all over it. He was moving fast now. I placed the envelope aside and reached for the flash drive Sophia handed me earlier that week. It was small, barely larger than a thumbnail, but heavier than anything I'd held in years. I plugged it in, waited. The screen flickered. There he was, Lennox, 10 years younger, standing at a panel at my old university, sleeves rolled, charisma turned to 11. I remembered the event well, mostly because I wasn't invited, but I watched it later, recorded by a student who ran the tech booth. The university kept the archive, forgot to delete it. I mean, none of this would exist without Cale, young Lennox was saying, laughing with the ease of someone who didn't know the mic was picking up everything. He's the mind, I'm just the voice. I paused the video. Sat back. Let the silence do the rest. That moment, tucked away in a forgotten folder, labeled with the wrong date, wasn't just validation. It was the final piece. The one thing Lennox couldn't rewrite or crop. The one time he spoke the truth before realizing it was dangerous. And tonight, he'd hear it again. So would everyone else. The fundraiser was being held at the downtown venue again. White linens, soft jazz, donors who wore their money like a fragrance. I arrived late, on purpose. Let them settle in first. Let them laugh, drink, pass around versions of the truth they were comfortable with. Inside, the air was dense with curated warmth. The board sat clustered near the stage. Lennox stood behind the podium, charming as ever, hand resting lightly on a crystal tumbler like he was born to hold court. I know we've all come a long way, he was saying, but what matters most is legacy, building something that outlives us. I rolled in quietly through the side aisle. A few heads turned, some widened. One donor whispered something that made the woman next to him glance sharply. I reached the edge of the room, just beside the projection screen. A staffer approached, startled. "Can I help?" "Mind if I say a few words?" I interrupted, calm but firm. Lennox stopped mid-sentence. His smile faltered. For a moment, silence hovered like static. Then, to my surprise, the moderator stepped aside. The lights dimmed. The screen behind Lennox lit up. The clip played, grainy but audible. Young Lennox, praising me like a brother who hadn't yet learned to sharpen words into weapons. Kyle built the framework. I just made the calls. None of this would exist without him. Gasps, a ripple in the room. I moved forward, slow, deliberate. Took the mic he'd left behind. "That was before they decided I was inconvenient," I said. "Before they erased me from photos, from records, from acknowledgments. Before the board told me I was unstable. Before I was escorted out of the same restaurant that's catered tonight's dinner." No one moved. Even the wait staff had frozen mid-pour. "I'm not here to reclaim a name," I continued. "I'm here to remind you whose hands laid the first bricks." I held up the original charter, the same document they tried to bury. The ink was faded but legible. My name at the bottom. Dated. Signed. Stamped. I co-founded this. And until recently, I believed that still meant something. From the back, someone began clapping. Then another. Then half the room. Lennox didn't speak. He just stared, hands clenched at his sides, smile gone. I leaned toward the mic one last time. You've seen what they say in front of donors. Now you've heard what they say behind closed doors. The choice isn't mine anymore. It's yours. I stepped away. No mic drop. No dramatic exit. I didn't need the last word. The screen went dark behind me, but the silence it left was louder than anything I could have said. Outside, the night was cooler than expected. Sophia met me near the sidewalk, jacket half zipped, expression unreadable. "He's leaving," she said quietly. "His office, cleaned out. No statement yet." I nodded, unclipped the folder from my lap. "He should. Because tomorrow." I paused, eyes steady. "The letter goes to the press." The next morning didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt quiet. Too quiet. Like the moment after a long argument when everyone has said the words that can't be taken back, and the house is left to absorb them. I woke up early, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my body didn't know how to sleep past the weight of everything that had finally been released. The city outside my window moved the way it always did. Cars passing, someone walking a dog, a delivery truck double parked with its blinkers on. Life didn't pause just because the truth had finally stepped into the light. Sophia was already in the kitchen when I rolled out, a mug warming her hands. She didn't ask how I slept. She didn't need to. She just nodded once, the way people do when they understand the kind of morning you're having. By mid-morning, we were standing inside the foundation office. It barely looked like a place anyone had worked. The walls were clean, the shelves stripped. Even the air felt different, like it had been exhaled out of. Lennox's nameplate was gone from the door. No scuff marks where it used to be. No drama. Just absence. Inside his old office, one thing had been missed. A framed photo sat on a lower shelf, leaned against the wall like someone had meant to come back for it. We were barely 20 in the picture, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning like the world hadn't yet taught us how to keep score. I picked it up, studied it longer than I expected. I didn't throw it away. I set it upright, facing the room, and walked out. Some memories don't need erasing. They just need to stop being in charge. Back at my apartment that afternoon, I laid everything out on the table. The charter, the transcript, the clip, copied twice. A clean timeline of what happened, when it happened, and who signed off on the silence. No adjectives, no anger, just record. Sophia watched from the couch while I slid the documents into a thick envelope. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. I sealed it, pressed my palm flat over the flap. "It's not revenge," I said. "It's history. And history doesn't belong to one family." We walked together to the mailbox at the corner. I dropped the envelope in and stood there a second longer than necessary, listening to it hit the bottom. That sound, paper meeting metal, felt final in a way shouting never does. That evening, after the sun dipped low enough to soften the buildings, I went for a walk. I didn't plan it. My hands just turned the wheels in a direction my body remembered before my mind caught up. The same street. The same stretch of stone under the tires. The restaurant appeared at the end of the block like a chapter marker I hadn't asked for. The manager saw me through the window before I reached the door. He stepped outside, polite, careful. "Good evening," he said. "Would you like a table tonight?" For a moment, the question hovered between us. All the nights I'd waited, all the explanations I'd rehearsed, all the times I'd believed a seat meant belonging. I smiled, small but real. "No," I said. "I just came to remember." He nodded, stepped aside, and I passed without slowing. Across the street, a small coffee shop glowed warm and unassuming. No valet, no reservations. A woman held the door open for me without a second thought. A kid at the counter waved, then went back to coloring inside the lines. I chose a corner seat by the window. Not hidden, not center stage. Just mine. The barista brought tea, set it down gently, and said nothing else. I wrapped my hands around the cup and watched the steam rise, thin and patient. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I thought about everything that didn't come back. The years, the trust, the version of my brother who once spoke my name without calculating the cost. None of that could be restored. And pretending otherwise would be another kind of lie. But something else had survived. My voice, not raised, not sharpened, just steady. They had built walls and called them legacy. I remembered the cracks, and through them I found myself again, not as the man waiting to be invited back in, but as the one who realized he didn't need the door. When I left, I folded a napkin and placed it on the table the way I used to at the old place. Habit, maybe. Or closure. The barista unfolded it after I was gone. Inside, written in careful ink, were the words I'd learned too late, but not too late to keep. You don't need their table. Build your own.